We enjoyed Jonathan's sharing experience, especially for international students. Now the next speaker is Mr. William Lai. William is the chair of Asia Pacific section of the Commercial Bar Association, Australian Day Ambassador for Victoria, and the principal representative of the World Chinese Economical Summit in Australia. I don't know what they are, but it sounds really good. William is the most reputable barrister in Victoria of the Chinese background. He's also the chief examiner of contract law at Monash University. To me, William is like a mentor. He has taught me a lot of things. One of them is the protocol when dealing with the mainstream society elites. I'm still learning from him. I consider myself lucky having someone like William to be a mentor who's been in Australia for 30 years, to guide me and inspire me. Let's welcome Mr. William Lai, Barrister of Law.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Thank you, Sean, for inviting me to be here to speak to all of you. We're going to have a conversation to talk about career opportunities and how to develop them over the next many years of your own journey in Australia. But can I first begin by congratulating Sean, SWN Seed Capital, or Seed Training actually, for putting this wonderful event on, and RMIT for hosting this place. My eldest son is an architecture student in RMIT, so thank you very much. Oh, sounds boom. So I was saying that my eldest son is doing architecture here, so RMIT is a great university. Now, I want to talk about just 4 things very quickly, given the time constraint. First, I want to share with you context. In fact, I noticed there's a lot of C's, alphabet C's, change, connect. But context is the first thing I want to talk about. So give you a perspective of who I am and where I come from. Then I want to talk very briefly about culture and what it means to be in the Australian mainstream culture and the Chinese culture. And then I want to talk about convergence, what that means. And finally, about connecting. And it's not just about connecting or getting connected, but it is about connecting to influence. And then make some conclusionary remarks. So thank you again, Sean, for the opportunity. And I really appreciate this opportunity to just share with you a few things. So who am I? I arrived in Melbourne, I think, in the late 1981, so December or early 1982. So I'm now a bit too old to remember all these things. I was in Sydney just last couple of days, and I was meeting a very important investor, and he thought I was 40 years old. And I said, I do look younger than I feel. I'm 53 next year, so more than half a century has gone past. And I reflect as I was just preparing, thinking about what do I say to all of you, that I've been now in Australia for 34 years. And to answer the question, Sean, you asked, Jonathan, does it matter whether you have an accent? I don't think it matters at all. I think what's important is that you strive to improve your language. And that is the important thing. You know, the Chinese, there are 300 million plus Chinese that speak English. So what brand of English are we talking about? The Queen's English? Australian English? How many non-Chinese speak Mandarin? So you've got to look at it from that perspective. Of course, the population is small in Victoria in terms of the Chinese group. But my own background is I came here to study, like all of you who have either just come or have been here for a few years. And it was a strange place. It was the first country that I've ever went to that's a Western country. So I did not know anyone. And so I had to make friends like all of you. and get involved like all of you. And the first group of people I met were essentially people from where I come from. So I was born in Malaysia. And being a Malaysian student coming here of Chinese background, I had only friends that I made over here who are from Malaysia of Chinese background. Now in those days there were hardly any friends or students from mainland China, and so there were fewer of us. I studied computer science and law, and one of the first few to graduate. So today, as I stand on this podium, I'm proud to say and pleased to say that Australia, Victoria has been really good to me. I am the most senior barrister of Chinese heritage in Victoria. And only a couple of months ago, the Attorney General of this state appointed the first magistrate of Chinese heritage. There are no Asian judges in Australia at superior court level. There are no Chinese Queen's Counsel. There are no Chinese born in Australia overseas judges. So we have a long way to go, but it is having conversations like this that we begin to share and collaborate together. So that's where I come from the perspective of someone who has reached a senior level in my profession, the legal profession, and as a barrister in a country where all the judges are white Anglo-Saxon Celtic, and not even Italians or Greek. We only have one Greek justice in the Supreme Court in Victoria. So there's a long way to go, but this Victoria, the state that we call home, is a great example of multiculturalism, and that's the context I come from, and I can share with that. Of course, it has been hard for me as the only Chinaman when I was practicing law. When you go to court, the only Chinese face. But that should not deter each of us to be different, as Jonathan has said. So that's the context. Now, you got to remember this. This culture, which is my next point, is a Western culture. This is where you choose to be. You've chosen to come to Australia to study in Victoria, so it is a Western culture. It's a great democracy, where in a few years you can have 5 different prime ministers. Just change like that. Nowhere else in the world, even in the other Western world. But that's the strength of our democracy. So in this place called Australia, our home, or my home, I'm proud to be Australian. It is an egalitarian society, very individualistic. Contrast that with the Chinese culture. We're very collective. We eat together from the same chopsticks. Whereas here they use fork and knife.
Excuse me, William.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Our audience at the back complaining they can't hear your sexy voice.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yell out. Be egalitarian. Don't worry about me. I know you're being respectful, so thank you very much for saying that. This is the egalitarian society that we live in. So we need to understand the differences, and we need to be in a position where we can preserve the values of our culture, but embrace the culture of the West. And that is a very important point. Do not fear. Get out there. One of the things that helped me when I was here in Australia is to play sports, to get involved. Understanding this culture is important because in Victoria particularly, if you don't know anything about footy, then you're missing out a lot of conversations. If you don't go to the pub and drink with your Aussie mates, you're going to miss out a lot of collegiate mateship. Mateship is something that is quite different from the Chinese concept of having relationships. And so that's something we can look at and understand. in terms of this difference in culture, egalitarian, individualistic, compared to being from a culture that we're taught to respect our elders, to respect authority, and so on and so forth. And we're taught that don't say anything unless you have something important to say, because otherwise you get shot down. Whereas in this culture, you must speak up. You must say something. If you don't say something, they think that you've got nothing to say or you accept what is being said. But that doesn't then necessarily mean that you are less of a leader. But unfortunately, that's the kind of box that is being ticked. And to understand that is very, very important. So that's the second thing I want to just highlight. Culture, very important to understand the differences, but don't just separate them and say, I'll just mix only with people from Shenzhen or from Shanghai or Jiangsu or from Malaysia or Singapore. Yeah, we are all very different. We're all Chinese, but we belong to the Fuzhou, the Hokkien, or the Minanghua people, or the Cantonese, Guangdongyan, What are we all, Hainanese, or... So we got to get away from that mentality and be proud of, especially those of you who want to be living here in Australia. So that's the second C that I want to talk about. The third thing is about converging the concept between East and West, coming together and understanding that we can preserve our values and yet embrace the culture that is in us. Get involved with things within the university, not just amongst the Chinese groups, but in other kinds of fields. And as I've said, get interested in footy, get interested in cricket, get interested not going to the pub and drinking and get pissed, but understand that there's a conversation there that you can have with your Australian mates, because that's what they do. And converging those kinds of ideals, focusing on the fact that we should celebrate our differences and enjoy them and encourage them. Finally, what I want to then share with you is connecting to influence. Now, this is not about networking. It is about connecting to influence. So it is not so much what you know or even who you know, but it's knowing who knows who. And that's how you build your connections. It is partly old school and partly new school. The old school are those people that you have grown up with, that are your friends from school, right from primary school or even at university. One day they will be your future leaders. They are your leaders that you can call on. And there is a bond between all of you because you grew up together from the same village, from the same province. You understand the language, you understand the engagement. And there's a strong sense of loyalty that you can call upon. But then there is a new school. The new school really is about being in Australia. It's about showing up. Showing up. Turn up and get involved. Speak up. And shape up, the 3S. Do something. If you feel that language is an issue, take extra classes. Get a boyfriend or girlfriend who's Australian. Do something that will help you improve. Don't make apologies, because this is Australia. And if you can make it in Australia, you can make it anywhere in the world, because the standards are very, very high. And in order then to connect even further, get involved in other things like philanthropy, giving, develop the culture of giving. I'm on the board of the Starlight Children's Foundation. And the foundation is a national body that helps children who are sick and ill and dying, and we give to charity. My wife is the founder of the Asian Australian Foundation, and she's garnering the community, the Asian establishment, no longer the mainstream establishment, the Asian establishment. Each of you here have that opportunity one day to make it that far. And finally, what I want just to encourage you is this. If you don't have someone to mentor you, find a mentor. But more importantly, prove yourself so that that mentor can be your sponsor. Because in this place, we all need sponsors. We all need to be able to connect to people who are influential. And if we can't find that 1 degree of separation, there'll be a 2 degree of separation. And it is through sessions like this that you connect. Connect to people who have, in a sense, made it, who have, as I would say, toiled and rode that bulldozer and create that pathway in that mountain so that others can then follow. So in conclusion, I just want to leave you with this thought for your own exploration. And that is that you can prepare your CV, you can prepare your resume, and that is the what. That is the output. So there are 3 things you want to think about. You start with not the what. That's the easy part. You start with the why. The why. Why is it that I should give you a job? What drives you? What makes you different? What differentiates you, as Jonathan said? Of course, you've got to be prepared. You've got to work hard. You've got to do all those things. And then you look at the journey, the how you got there. And if you can think, and that's the hardest question to answer, but if you can think, why is it that you're doing what you're doing? Why is it that you are studying accounting? Is it because you want to follow after your father or mother? Or why is it that you're doing law, etc.? That's not good enough. They'll get you somewhere. But to be sustainable, to last through, to be like me, being the only Chinese in a conservative profession, you've got to go deeper so that you then be able to fulfill all those goals and objectives and then give back and help others to rise up. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate that, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to share a story about William. You know, you probably don't even know. A good friend of mine, Joey, graduated from Melbourne University, Bachelor of Law, and she's a Chinese solicitor. Or she used to work for William and help William. And she told me a story. During I think, a court hearing, during the lunch break, William asked Joey to find a court decision. And Joey was looking through the 30 pages court judgment. And she's like, where is it? Where is it? It's been like 15 minutes, couldn't find it. And William came, you haven't found it yet? And scroll down, literally scrolling down. There you go. And stop, find a decision, find a reference. I guess that's what comes with experience. So I just want to ask a quick question, William. You have personally tried to help young Asian Australians to grow. And the foundation, I mean, if the audience want to participate in it or be involved, how do you do it?
Thank you for asking me about the foundation. Fortunately, there are 2 directors of the foundation here, Gary Chung and Jonathan Wang. You can speak to them because they're on the board. But I suppose you asked me the question because my wife is actually the chair and founder. So I have to represent her like every good husband. The Asian Australian Foundation has, among its objectives, one of a very important thing, and that is to be involved in capacity building. And it is through foundations like this that, and it's a community foundation that has charitable status and DGR status. But it's through foundation like this that the community, those who are now have broken the ceiling or have done a lot in this country, feel a need to bring the resources of the community together in order to then give back in a philanthropic way to make and see change, for example, in capacity building, in education, and in the arts. These are things that will help the community rise up. And we learn from other communities, like the Jewish community and others, that are very, very much involved in giving back to the society that they belong to. And it's not about just giving money away so that you feel good about yourself. It's giving money away so that there is an impact, a social impact for future generations. And it is all that we ought to learn. From the West, they are very good at philanthropy. The East also give money. But you know, you always give money with conditions. Giving is giving. Once you've given it away, it's somebody else's responsibility to do it. So with that, I would encourage you, whether you are going to support a foundation like the Asian Australian or any other type of foundation, Salvation Army, the Lions Club, the Starlight Children's Foundation, many, many other worthy causes. And that's where you can then develop your connections and connect to people who are passionate about giving back, not just to one community, but to the Australian community. And this is what we need to get into our mindset, that although I am Chinese, Malaysian by birth, I am Australian by choice. And this is my home, and I've got to do all I can to make this society that I live in and my future generations to be a better place.
Thank you very much for sharing, William. Thank you.